Alright, first of all, sorry for not uploading much recently. I've been kind of busy with real life stuff, but I have still been reading the comments. So today we're going to be making a brand new tier list ranking every meta unit in Anime Last Stand as of update 54. Hopefully you enjoy the video or find it helpful. If you do, maybe leave a like or subscribe. But anyways, let's get into it. Okay, so today we're doing things a little bit differently because we have so many new or buff units to talk about. We're going to be starting off with my pre-made tier list from my last tier list video, so make sure if you want explanations for the units here, that you go check out this video and watch all that. But starting off with the new units here, we have Shisui, and Shisui is an interesting case because he's not like that strong of a unit on his own, but he does have a passive that is going to have a follow-up attack for the strongest unit in his range. So he's kind of like a damage buffer in that regard. He can increase the DPS output of the strongest unit in his range, and he's a 3 placement unit, which I think means his passive can be on all 3 of his placements. So if you can get like 3 follow-up attacks on a Gilgamesh, for example, the new godly, with a ton of damage output from him, Shisui is going to be crazy. So he all depends on like the team you run him with, and for that reason, I think he does kind of have permanent viability. He's always going to be meta. Even if they do like end up adding new, stronger units, he's always going to buff them. And he might end up getting nerfed or reworked in the future, but for now, very strong unit for sure. Maybe either behind or above Sun Jinwoo. I don't know. It depends on what content. I'd say for the most part above Sun Jinwoo though. Bulma, another very strong unit of the new update, but for a different reason. She's going to be a new farm, which we haven't had a new one in a while, but she is going to be very strong. Kind of like an infinite base unit like Robin here for farming, because pretty much she has a passive on the final upgrade. After 7 waves, she gains a wish ball, and she can call in a wish that is going to either buff units damage, buff units money, or reduce their ability cooldowns by, I think, like 20 to 25%. Overall, a very good farm and buff unit. Very, very solid, and in most cases, maybe even the best farm in the game. Super Sisters, or Kefla, I think. I know people might get mad at this. I don't know how many of you have actually farmed for them, but personally, as someone who has this unit, I don't think she's very good, or they are very good. Way too situational because like they take a while to ramp up their damage. If you don't know, they have like 3 different forms, and the first form is really bad for progressive. Very, very bad unit. So if you take the time to ramp her up into form 3, actually a very good unit with some of the highest damage in the game. The problem is that there aren't many game modes where you need to wait that long. You don't even need that damage anymore because you'll just use a different unit in the meta infinite tier. So in my opinion, not a bad unit, but doesn't really fall into any of the categories. Maybe like here in decent. It just doesn't really fit into any of the meta ones. Tengen. In my opinion, this unit did probably kind of power creep Rimuru as the full AoE weakened unit. He has full AoE, weakened, bolt, and bleed. Very good DPS with that as well. Well, okay DPS, but Rimuru is probably moving down to decent, and his value is kind of not too great anymore because we already have a full AoE weakened now with Tengen, so probably going maybe right about here. And I'd honestly, while we're here, move down Chihiro and Kurumi as well to decent. Phaeton. The Infinity Castle unit is capsule opened with the newest update, so he's kind of like a burn unit. I know we have a lot of different fire units that can kind of buff or rely on burn teams. He's one of those where he can, I believe it was every burning unit he attacks, he can make bleed as well. He's full AoE with pretty good DPS. He's okay. I'd put him in decent. Depends on the team you run him with. Gilgamesh. Okay. He is one of the strongest godlies we've gotten in a while. He has a very strong godly lead. Depends on the element of your team, but most of the buffs are all very good. The unit himself is a duo unit with Enkidu as a summon behind him, and he costs 5k to play, so he's okay for progressive. He's a little bit expensive to place, but once you get him down, you pretty much win. This unit is crazy. His summon Enkidu is amazing for supporting value because he has random passive, he has a buffing ability I think, and also the only ability that can restore base stocks that are lost, so very good for that. Other than units that have abilities and stuff, he is the highest consistent DPS in the game, and he has a nuke ability as well, 2 of them. So very good unit, definitely top meta overall. I think he is probably the strongest unit in the game right now. Medusa. I think Medusa is underrated personally. I might be biased because I have Bush on her, but she has pretty high full AoE range with Petrified, and Petrified is a new status effect unique to her, which is pretty much an up to 15-second stun. So it depends on like her SPA. Pretty much is going to stun enemies for up to 15 seconds and can break the stun after like 3 attacks and do a ton of damage after that. So for a unit with good DPS, Petrify is very strong, because not only is she going to have supporting value full AoE stun, but also she's going to break that stun and do a ton of damage on top of that. Very strong unit, I think meta overall. And probably right about here. Right above Arthur. Caster Saber. This unit is definitely a buffer, a support only. Has weakened on, I think, every upgrade. Pretty strong buffs depending on the rotation of her chimes or bells or whatever they're called. Very good buffer. Ishtar is a cheap hill unit with very good DPS on placement. Also has Cripple, a very unique passive of ramping up damage depending on the enemies on the map and enemies that she kills with her ability. Very high ceiling, very high potential if you kind of ramp up and like get her damage and range increased. Very good progressive unit for sure. I would say probably right about here in progressive. If you have her on like Omnipotent, she is very, very good. The Battle Pass unit, Astolfo. This guy, he's okay. Alright damage, has like a stun passive kind of thing. Not a very good support, not a very good damage unit, but overall, if you're like a new player, you can kind of use him, it's whatever. Dark Sakura, in my opinion, this unit is bananas, okay? I have a video on her when she was bugged and like didn't work. Her passive was doing like 1, 2, 0 damage sometimes. But now it's fixed and she has like an ability that can increase 2 units in her range, DPS by like 300 million. So she's a very, very good just raw damage unit. Not necessarily a buffer, because she doesn't increase anybody's damage inherently. She just kind of gives them her own damage. So, a very strong raw DPS unit. I'd say like, better overall for sure, and maybe right about here. I would say probably better than Sun Jin Woo. Situationally, not too good in infinites. I know that usually like, if a unit isn't good in infinites, I don't put them this high in meta overall. But I do think because of the way her passive works, her aura of doing damage per second, like every second tick of damage, she actually can be good in infinites because she's going to help waves pass by a lot quicker. So overall, very strong unit. Now we have all the new units out of the way. Moving on to the buffs and reworks, we have Asta. And Asta, not a huge rework, kind of in hand with Yuno of if you use them together. Asta gets the buff of being a nature unit pretty much, and Yuno gets the buff of being a dark unit pretty much. Asta is still a demon like he was before. Yuno's alright. I put him probably meta early now because they did actually rework how his passive works. So he's going to build up his meter every attack instead of every 2. So it doesn't take as long to ramp up and can be very good and progressive. Because we put Ishtar in meta early as well, I'm going to move Gremmy down because Gremmy was the light starter for a while, or one of them, but definitely value decreasing now. Noelle also got a rework, not a huge one. Still just a water buffer support. She's now a 4 placement with stronger DPS I think, and a couple of reworks to her passives, but nothing too crazy there. Julius is now hybrid on placement, which makes him way better for progressive. Still meta overall in my opinion. Conrad. This is an interesting one because he did get nerfed pretty hard. I would say this unit is still really good and can maybe be in meta overall. Sometimes, depending on what you're running. But I think because they nerfed his overall DPS on like all upgrades and his progressive damage isn't too good anymore, he can be good for applying status effects, arguably a support, and arguably meta infinite. This guy, kind of like a jack of all trades, but not, yeah, master of none. If anything, master of infinite though. Pretty good. Bone Demon. This guy meta early. They did buff him. His damage is significantly higher now. I think he is very strong. I'd put him right above Ishtar and meta early. Very good unit for bleed and cripple. For all the different forms of Shinra, I'm going to try my best to explain the different changes he got. So, every form of Shinra now changes elements depending on the most dominant element in your team. So before he used to always be fire and just have different passives. Now he actually changes elements depending on your element, so like if you run a light team, he actually becomes a light unit. Aside from that, every different form of Shinra did receive buffs to their passives and performance. So the fire form of Shinra apparently has a new effect, which I'm not sure if it was just a change to what he had previously, but they say a new effect and his damage increased. I actually didn't really see what new effect they were talking about, but he is a lot stronger in the DPS department. I'd put him probably right about here in meta overall. The water form of Shinra, in my opinion, is better than the fire form because it has a full AoE blizzard. His damage got buffed, and his ability now does 20 times damage instead of just 5 times, so a lot stronger with a kind of burst DPS there. I'd put him probably right about here, yeah, just above Fire Shinra for now. The nature form of Shinra, definitely a meta infinite unit still. He still has that full AoE chance to kill every 5 attacks thing, so very good for meta infinite for sure. But he also now has a buff, he now has Accelerate, Wind Shear, and Slow, very good for applying a bunch of different debuffs there. And he also got his damage increased just overall. The dark form of Shinra now has Despair, which I think used to be conditional from his passive, now it's kind of a permanent thing I believe, which is a very good supporting ability, or supporting passive. And his damage got increased, and his nuke damage also got increased, so very good for personal damage and debuffing. I'd say arguably better than Quincy King in support tier, but I'd put him here for now. The light form of Shinra got an SPA reduction to his final 2 upgrades, very good for a bullet unit. He got a range buff, which is good because I think he has a cone AoE if I remember correctly. He got a rework slash buff to one of his passives, and then a buff to his lightning shower ability. Overall, much better. I'd put him probably right between the fire and light form of Shinra and meta overall. The neutral form of Shinra got a buff to his damage and AoE size, and also a nuke damage buff to 1.5 trillion. Very good infinite unit for sure. Ichigo. This guy got probably the biggest buff in the history of this game, I think. He was very, very bad before. He is much better now. He is a progressive demon, very good for progressive stages only. He takes a while to ramp up his full potential, but even on placement, his potential is very high. He's just a pure raw DPS unit, and right now he is bugged to do, like, I think up to billions of DPS in infinite runs, so people are finding out. I'm not sure what causes that, but because I think a bug like that will be fixed pretty soon, and him doing billions of damage I don't think is intentional, I'm not going to put him in meta overall, because he is just kind of meta for early and early stages only. Very good for progressive, don't get me wrong. I'd put him probably right about here in meta early. While we're in here, we can probably move down Gray, because Gray's getting outdated. I'd put him probably right about here if you want full AoE freeze. And then Goku Black, I'd honestly move down. I think I overestimated him. I'd put him right about here. But Ichigo, very, very good unit for progressive, and okay in infinites right now because he's bugged, but I believe that'll be fixed pretty soon. Wukong. The only buff to him was making his Nirvana ability thing a non-global cooldown, so the unit himself has not really changed at all. I'd say I'd put him right about here in meta overall. Between the Water Shinra and Light Shinra. Goku, this update, I think he got an overall damage nerf to his nuking ability. It is now capped at a 200% damage increase. I'm not sure what it was before, but it is significantly lower, I believe. Still meta overall though. I guess his nuke is just not as strong, but I put him right below Wukong in meta overall. Madoka, final unit to rank here. She got a lot of changes actually, I'm gonna read them all out. Her nuke damage got nerfed, so she's not as strong for her nuke in Goddess form anymore. The Power Wishes passive, also in the Goddess form, also got nerfed. Arrow Salvation now has a 35-second cooldown. Her damage was increased. The Witch form now has Fear and Despair. Witch form now has its own damage and range. And final upgrade price reduced to 650k in the Goddess form. So a bunch of different changes there. The Goddess form got kind of overall nerfed, but also made cheaper, so better for progressive kind of. And then the Witch form, in my opinion, is actually very strong now. Now has a Despair and Fear and pretty good DPS as well. Overall a very solid unit, and I'd put her probably right about here in meta overall. Oh shoot, one more thing I forgot to mention. Immortal King also got buffed this update. Pretty much his rewind ability now makes enemies walk back for 40 seconds, and his insta-killing ability now kills up to 60 enemies instead of 30. Very good for infinites now. Overall over Sun Jinwoo. Sun Jinwoo is still better for progressive, like I do want to clarify. The units in meta overall are kind of messy. I think that like some of them are good for progressive, some of them are good for infinites, you know, there's like a bunch of variation between all these units, but overall, Wong Ling probably more value than Sun Jinwoo now. Anyways, I think these are the final rankings. Let me know how you feel in the comments down below. I know I didn't explain too much this time because I was focused on the new units and units who got buffed, but I do think this list looks pretty good in my opinion. Anyways, thank you to my channel members for making this video possible. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one, and have a great day.